Hello and welcome once again to Ruby's Classic Cooking. Today I'm going to make gingerbread. And I don't know why they call it gingerbread, because you bake it in a cake pan. So it turns out like a cake. It's an 8-inch square Pyrex pan. I'm going to take a picture of it. You go right ahead. Okay, there we go. All right. There it is, hot water gingerbread right there. And you know what? If you look this up in the index, it will be under H for hot water, for hot water, because this is the most peculiar index I've ever seen in a cookbook in my life. Oh, there's my oven coming up to temperature. Beep. Anyway, not that I'm being censored. All right, well, we're going to start out with, let's see, 1/2 of a cup of lightly packed down brown sugar. Now that's yellow sugar or your old-fashioned brown sugar, and you take your measuring cup and you pack it in so that when you turn it turns out like a sandcastle, you know, like it holds the shape of the measuring cup. That's when you know you've packed it in firmly enough. No air bubbles in it, and it usually leaves the, the impression of that in your bowl. But anyway, it isn't today. And 1/3 of a cup of shortening. Sorry, I can't read that. So that's 1/3 of a cup of shortening and my brown sugar here in my bowl, which I've already added here. And it says to beat until light. This cookbook, by the way, is still in print, and you can get it at bookshops, you can get it at tourist places, you can find it in used bookstores and book sales and all kinds of places. The first copy I bought cost $1. That was in 1961, I think, somewhere around there. 62. And nowadays it's more like about 18 or 20 bucks. But it's the same cookbook. The first one was bound in metal coil, and the pictures in it were in color. Now it's bound in a different manner, and the pictures are now unfortunately black and white. But it was put out by the Purity Flour company, and it has really good recipes in it for just about anything, like how to make jelly or jam, how to make candy, how to make bread, of course, because it's a flour company that put it out, and all the recipes use all-purpose flour. Like this one uses all-purpose flour too. Now I'm just going to mix this together. You just want to beat this up until you get a different consistency. You get your shortening and your sugar kind of beats together, and it absorbs itself. Well, that's kind of mixed up here. And now I'm going to take an egg. This is a grade A large white egg. I'm sorry about it. White eggs, brown eggs. You know what? A white egg is just the same on the inside as a brown egg. They just want to charge you more. It's marketing. It's called marketing. So they have decided to let people think that brown eggs are better somehow than white eggs, and you should buy them and use them. And it's like, yeah, but they're no different than a white egg. Really, not at all. I'll wash off this egg white stuff all over my hands. You know, that's something that the home cook is aware of and has to be aware of, is marketing, because it's everywhere. Groceries and food and supplying food for you is a multi-million-dollar industry, multi-billion-dollar industry. They have the best ad campaign people working on their ad campaigns to convince you to buy their mix or their brand of whatever. And there's a lot of brands out there and a lot of choices, and they want you to choose their brand. And believe me, they will go out of their way to do anything they can to get you to buy their brand. Now, what's next on the menu here? Okay, next, I'm supposed to take my flour. This is a 1/2 cup and a half of all-purpose flour. It's plain old white all-purpose flour, and it still is on sale. You can get a brand name of 10 kilos of white all-purpose flour for $8.99, $9.99 a bag. It's normally, $17 or so a bag, so that's about half price. So when you see it on sale, buy it. You need some kind of large container to keep it in, because it can't stay in the bag after you've opened it. You'll have flour everywhere. I have 2 big Tupperware containers that are airtight that I put my flour in. Of course, I understand these 2 great big containers aren't available from Tupperware anymore, so what you need is something that'll hold about 5 kilos and it's airtight. And it doesn't matter if it's Tupperware or if it's whatever it is. So that's what you need to keep your flour in, because you got to keep the freshness in, you want to keep the bugs out, or if it gets loaded with bugs, it's not much of a bargain, is it? So I need to add to this flour 1 teaspoon of baking soda. Now this is baking soda and not baking powder, which is a different compound. And I need a teaspoon of this. Well, I've got my measuring spoons here, and this one happens to be a teaspoon. I just dip into my box and just level it off. Oops. I just want to level that off. Myself a level teaspoon of that stuff. I wouldn't use a spoon from out of my kitchen drawer to do this, because you can't get a nice level teaspoon, and it's not necessarily a measuring spoon, which is what they're talking about. Next, I add a 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt, and this one right here is a 1/4 of a teaspoon. So I just kind of, I don't measure in metric, so, and I don't have metric measuring spoons, so sorry if you cook in metric, you'll have to figure out your equivalencies. All right, now, so the original recipe says 1 teaspoon, but I didn't really find that was enough, very much ginger flavor. So I've changed it to 2 teaspoons, which is something I do from time to time. So here's my teaspoon. I'm just going to add, oops, get the other end open. I'm just going to put 2 teaspoons in here, because that just gives me more gingery flavor. And if you find that this isn't enough gingery flavor for you and you want to add fresh grated ginger or ginger root or whatever, go for it, because it's all about the flavor of the cake according to what you are used to. And our palates have gotten to the point where we want a lot more of this kind of flavor in our food than they did in the 50s and 60s. I mean, they may have wanted more in theirs, but they didn't really have the option during rationing during World War II to indulge in that kind of thing. They had to go with the lesser amount. And now I have cinnamon, and I need a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. And I find that that is plenty of cinnamon. So I'm just going to dip my half teaspoon measuring cup in here and get out my 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. Put that in there on top. There we go. Okay. So now, and I like to put my things away. I like to put my ingredients away as I use them. Then I know, okay, I put it in there for sure. And I like to get them all out before I get started, because then I know, oh, right, I didn't add that twice, and I didn't forget to put something in. And I don't go, oh my God, I'm halfway through this recipe and I don't have any blank. Gotta run out to the store right now and get it, because I'm committed to this recipe. So if you just do your mise en place, the French call it. Very fancy chefy word, but all it means is get all the stuff out and make sure you got it in the house before you start cooking something. Okay, so now I have all those things together here, and I'm going to take a fork and just a little stir up here. I don't usually bother doing this, but today I'm being fancy because I'm teaching you how to do this recipe, and I figured maybe I should do it properly instead of the way I normally do it, which is a bit more slapdash. To be honest. Anyway, okay, so I'm just going to stir that into my flour. And there we go. Now, got my brown sugar, my shortening, my brown sugar, and my egg in here. I'm still trying to get some of those lumps out of there, but that's okay. Put that in there. And now what I'm going to do next is I have a 1/2 cup of molasses. Now this might be a bit of an exotic ingredient in your house. So before you make gingerbread, you really do need to have molasses. Now personally, I find when you're buying molasses, the bigger the container, the cheaper it is. You might not want to pay $17 or $18 for 5 liters of molasses, which is about 4 quarts. so or a gallon of molasses, but it's going to be the cheapest way to get it, and it doesn't go bad. And if you use molasses at all for recipes, and I do use molasses, I use it in my fruitcake. Yes, I'm one of those weird people that make fruitcake for Christmas. I use it when I'm making this gingerbread and this gingerbread, and I use it when I'm doing beans, homemade beans, which I'll show you how to make in another episode. It's another of my recipes I'm going to show you. Now, it says to combine it with a half a cup of hot water. So here's a half a cup of regular hot water. I did heat it up in my kettle, so it's good and hot. And this is a half a cup of molasses. This right here is a Pampered Chef little gizmo that I love to keep in my kitchen. I don't usually like unitaskers, but this isn't really a unitasker. This is a multitasker, because you can measure mayonnaise, you can measure oil, you can measure like liquid oil, you can measure molasses, peanut butter, if you're making peanut butter cookies, all kinds of things like that you can measure with it. So it comes very handy. So now I'm just going to put these in my sink to the way. And it says to add the dry ingredients to the creamed mixture alternately with the molasses and hot water. Blend until well combined. Okay. So, just kind of stirring this up. See how my molasses and my water are kind of becoming one instead of being two layers? I'm just kind of stirring that. We're using the same fork I did for the I used for the flour. I'm just kind of mixing those up in my liquid measuring cup, because molasses is a semi-liquid, and water, of course, is a liquid. Haha, as if you didn't know that. And I'm just gonna see how that's kind of still needs a bit more stirring around, but that's okay. While that's doing that, I'm going to take my flour mixture here. I'm going to take I'm just going to estimate roughly a third what's in here. I don't get too bothered about whether it's exactly 1/3 or not, because you know what, it's all eventually going to go into this bowl. That's the word I'm looking for, fragile, because you want it to be nice. It just makes it too much of a mess to try and do it all at once. And then you want to add some of the liquid component to it as well. Now that you've got this done, it's starting to look like a batter. Okay, now I'm going to mix this up a little bit more, and I'm going to add about half of this, which is a half a cup. So I'm just going to go half a cup. And I got a little more than a half a cup, but I'm not going to be bothered by that. I'm going to stir this liquid in until it disappears. And you notice I'm just using a good old-fashioned wooden spoon here to stir this up with. I don't need any fancy equipment to cook this with. I just need a bowl, a mixing bowl, a pan, my oven, wooden spoon to stir this up with, and a spatula to scrape my bowl with, you know, all that kind of good stuff. So, bless you. That's our visiting dog again. He's sneezing over there, if you're wondering what that weird noise is. There we go. Now the liquid is more or less combined. Need a lot thinner. So now I'm going to add another third of my flour into here. There. And I'm just going to stir that in, and then this will make it more batter-like. Then I'm going to grease my pan, and I'm going to just add a little liquid oil to that. Now, in the good old days, you would have used a little grease on a piece of wax paper or a bit of butter or something like that, or a little bit of shortening, lard, and greased your bowl with that, greased your pan with that. That's so it doesn't stick. There we go. There's the second batch of flour added, all mixed up. And now I'm just going to add the rest of what's left of my hot water and molasses in here. Or you can make a lemon sauce, which I've never done actually, because I prefer whipped cream with mine. So I don't make lemon sauce with it. Now, If you've ever gone to Peggy's Cove, which is a very popular place in Nova Scotia, one of the most popular pitchers from the province, there's a restaurant out there. It's called the Southwester. And they serve whipped cream, they serve gingerbread for dessert. And you can have it with whipped cream, or you can have it with the lemon sauce. And it's very good gingerbread, let me tell you. I have it myself when I'm out there. Sort of one of those, oh my God, we're at the Southwester, we have to have gingerbread and whipped cream for dessert. That's sort of one of those, gotta do that sort of things. When I get out to the Peggy's Cove every 10 years or so. You know, I don't know if you live in a place where there's giant tourist attractions or not, and if you do, think about how many times you go to them. Unless you're entertaining company from out of town and you know, never seem to go there yourself. All right, there it is. There's the rest of the molasses and hot water in there. And now I'm just going to add the rest of my flour. There we go. And I'm just going to stir that in. Now, I use molasses, and that's not treacle or whatever they call blackstrap or whatever. That's just plain old molasses. There we go. You can put molasses on your pancakes. You can use molasses for lots of things because it's a natural syrup derived from brown sugar, actually. It's a part of the rum making process, I guess. When they were doing sugar cane, back in the good old days, it ended up with these barrels of molasses after they were finished making sugar cane, making wet sugar from the sugar cane, and they'd have the barrels sitting around, and this stuff would start bubbling to the top, and that was molasses. And they would tap off the molasses, and then at the bottom they'd have the brown sugar. So just kind of an interesting little bit of history. That's where molasses comes from. So really, it's more or less a natural kind of sugar. It's not an artificial sweetener. Anyway, I'm a bit against artificial sweeteners and artificial whatevers, because you know what? Human beings have been eating sugar, and they've been eating butter, cheese, things like that for literally thousands of years. Now, when it comes to olive oil, well, the Romans were using olive oil 2,000 years ago, so it's got a long history. I'm just going to take a little corner off a piece of paper towel, see, and I'm just going to take my liquid oil and I'm just going to wipe that around inside of here. Go right up to the top of my pan. I just poured probably about a teaspoon of oil in here. And there we go. Now my oven is on at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 175 degrees Celsius, if you're Celsius baking out there. There we go. Now, if anybody's watching this from the United States, the flour you get in the United States is different than the flour we get in Canada. We get flour made from hard durum wheat, which means we use a different amount of flour when we're baking. So for baking, you have to convert the amount of flour, because it will be wrong in your baking if you're using a Canadian recipe. So I'm not quite sure what the translation is, but if you have a cookbook that tells you both, which, like if you own a bread machine, and how many people out there own a bread machine, put your hands up, then you know that it will say on one side American and the other side Canadian. So just look at that amount of flour and figure out how much you need to make a 1.5 cups, the equivalent of 1.5 cups of Canadian hard durum wheat, because it's a softer kind of wheat that they use in the United States to make flour, which really makes it difficult, because if you buy an American cookbook and you're Canadian, it doesn't really work. Now, do I have everything in here? Let me see. I have my shortening, I have my brown sugar, I have my egg, I have my flour, baking soda, salt, ginger, cinnamon, molasses, and hot water. Yep, it's all in. And that's what the finished dough looks like. It's a little dark today. I think that might be because I used a dark color brown sugar this time. Old-fashioned brown sugar instead of using the yellow brown sugar. And I also put a bit more ginger in here. Put another cup of ginger in here, so but that's okay because nice dark gingerbread is very nice. So I'm carefully scraping this off of my bowl, off my spoon here. And I'm going to dump this into my baking pan. And this goes into the oven for, let's see, 40 to 45 minutes at 350, 175 Celsius. And then that, you gotta make sure you get your bowl nicely scraped out. You don't want to leave half your cake behind in the bowl. So I like to have a nice spatula that I can use to do this, because I like to have my bowl well scraped out. Here's my cake in the pan. You see how high in my pan it is? And I'll show you this after I get it out of the oven, and this should pop up, and it should pretty much fill my pan up with my gingerbread. And I'll get this stuff out of the way, and then I'm going to do some whipped cream. The good old-fashioned way, well, with electric heat, because in the really old days, they only had a handheld egg beater to do this, and believe me, I don't ever want to use a handheld implement to try and make whipped cream. That's why electricity was invented, right? I'll set that for 45 minutes, and I'll check it after about 40 minutes. Okay, out there in YouTube land, a half an hour, well, 40 minutes has gone by, and guess what? My cake is done. I just used one of my high-tech cake testers. Yes, this is a toothpick. You stick it into your cake in the middle like that, and if it comes out clean like that, that means that your cake is cooked. And also, if you look at your pan and you see that the cake is just starting to pull away from the pan, the edges of the pan, that's also an indication that it is cooked. And you see how thick this is? It's about double what it was when it went in the oven, which is good. Now, this is really hot. It just came out of a 350 Fahrenheit, 175 degrees Celsius oven. So it's got to sit here and cool a bit before I can cut it. And I've got my cutting implement all ready to go. And I'm going to put them in nice big bowls. And I'm going to blob a big serving of whipped cream on that to have for dessert tonight. So I'm just going to let this cake cool for now, because if you cut it when it's too hot, it does kind of crumble and mess it up. So I'll probably cut this into 9 pieces for my husband and I. And anyway, if I was having other company, so 9 servings of a dessert, and you saw how easy that was. Now, if you like this recipe, you know, you can always subscribe to my channel and click the like button. Why is that hard to say? Like button. And then also, if you make this recipe, hey, tell me some comments about it. Did you like it? Did your family like it? Did you serve it with whipped cream? Did you try and find a recipe for lemon sauce? What did you do? Have you looked for the cookbook? By the way, I've seen that cookbook on eBay for sale too. So there you go. There's the recipe. If you want to just take a picture of this page, go right ahead. And so anyway, that's my recipe for hot water gingerbread. I hope you enjoyed watching it, and I hope you'll enjoy trying it at home. This is what my finished cake looks like. All golden brown and delicious gingerbread. Just waiting for a nice big blob of whipped cream on top.